Sure, thank you. So I'm driving home right now. This is Tala. I won't be able to turn on my camera for like the first 20 to 30 minutes, but I will be on as soon as I can.
Okay. Yay. Um, I also just realized that because I have free Zoom, I think our meeting can only be 40 minutes long. Um, but based on like the time suggestions, I think we'll be fine if we do our introductions or like catch up just a little bit more quickly. And then if we can't get through all of the planning, for the next assignment at the end, we could just finish planning it over text. Okay.
Um, so should we start, I guess, with a check-in? Simone, Tala, how are you doing?
Um, this week has been a doozy. This past week, definitely just busy, chaotic week. That's the short of it.
I agree. This Monday's very much Mondaying.
Yeah, I'm doing PD today and tomorrow, and it's honestly been kind of nice just getting to like chill out, to have a little break as much as I love the kids. I've been sick, so I think it's been needed.
I'm gonna agree with Simone and Tala. I've got a case of the Mondays. Garfield said it best. It's tough. I have PD tomorrow, and so I spent a lot of time today planning for a sub that I have to have in class tomorrow, and making sure that they're just caught up with what all my different classes are supposed to be doing, and just kind of giving them some pointers and a little bit of forewarning about some of the energy and misbehavior that they might encounter.
That's definitely relatable. I'm doing some prep for a sub later on in the week, and yeah, we're only in like fourth week of school, and I'm like, I need to provide a dissertation on about five people.
Yep, yep.
Do you guys just want to jump in and go through like question by question?
I'm down.
Yeah, works for me.
Yeah, it's cool with that. And
Um,
then, so you guys want to do about the 10 minutes, um, about the 10 minutes, give or take on this portion. Oh, no, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, sorry.
all right. Clock's gotten started. Cool. So the first question asking us about reson resources that resonated with us from the session. Right off the bat, I know that there were two. One was one of the digital articles on the web, and the other one was one of the actual book readings. Um, there was an article that was posted from the Southern Poverty Law Center called When Schools Cause Trauma that really resonated with me, because there was a subsection in it called Trauma in Policy, um, that caused me to think a lot about the impact that some of the kind of minor disciplinary stuff that I have to do every day is maybe having on students of mine who are experiencing or have experienced trauma in the past, and how I might be kind of reinforcing some bad stuff or potentially triggering them with things that I don't even think about as being or as carrying that weight in discipline. Things like telling kids to sit in their seat the whole time, telling kids to, I don't know, just focus the whole time, not keeping their voices at a consistent level, that kind of thing, not to get fired up about certain things. I It made me realize I need to check myself a little bit more when I'm issuing those kind of commands. And while they have a place in classroom management, I need to I need to be thoughtful when I'm dealing with the kids. Um, and the other thing was the Bessel van der Kolk book, The Body Keeps the Score, which I've actually read some of before because it was a big resource for me while I was in therapy. In the past year, my therapist was a big proponent of Dr. van der Kolk's research, and this idea, the Porges 3 levels of safety theory, the idea that when we feel threatened by something, whether it's a triggering experience or something that reminds us of trauma or new trauma, we kind of instinctively turn to social engagement. But if no one kind of comes to meet us halfway with that, we can click into fight or flight. And if those don't work, whether it's because of a school disciplinary policy or a physical restriction, we go into the third mode, which is less talked about, which is freeze. The idea of just kind of shutting down emotionally. Stop, you're not communicating, you're not processing things, you're not doing anything because you feel threatened and you're reverting to this. My therapist would always talk about it, lizard brain, like this fear, this evolutionary fear that's in us all from back when we hadn't fully evolved into humans yet, and we were still doing things like fighting and hunting and foraging all the time. Um, and just about how some of my students are probably doing that, and when they're like have their head down the whole class, or are not responding to group discussions or not participating in one of our class-wide discussions or activities, to consider that.
Okay, I think you brought out some really good points. Just like in some of the readings, I too definitely dived into the first one that you talked about. For me, I kind of had a couple of different like full circle moments while reading. Of course, thinking about my position and what it looks like to be the classroom leader, and how educators are kind of stuck in a place where we're trained on how to support students, but we're not really trained on how to support those students. Of course, they're like, refer them to this type of position, or, this person, a behavioral management support, or a counselor, or, someone that's a little bit more, more experienced on handling these situations. But it can be difficult when this student is going through these things every single day, and you have to manage that class of 30, and of course abide by national regulations about teaching, and then abide by your school district, and then if your school has their own set of rules. I think schools are an interesting place where their goal is to help students and educate them. And they also try to bring in that social and emotional component, but sometimes it can get overshadowed by so many of the behavior issues that, of course, sometimes they do pose a real risk to us as a staff and other students, but they have deeper seated issues going on. And we don't really take time to address the trauma. Something else that I've read in my free time while working on something for my licensure classes, if you guys are in TFA, like our licensure thing or whatever. So the most recent assignment we had to do, we just picked a topic. And so mine ended up being just Black girls in high school and the amount of like ISS. Oh, she said if somebody can watch their comment. Um, but the amount of times girls either have OSS or out of school, in school suspension, and they also have a school resource officer at the school. And so it was an interesting study because out of the schools that had resource officers, someone that's supposed to be our extension to the community, support these children and figure out what issues may be going at home, if there are any legal things going on, that they were often suspended more rigorously and more extensively than some of their other counterparts. And so it's like we can learn about these trauma informed practices. We can, use the ACEs tool. It's been really helpful. My first graduate school experience. But how do we actually put this into practice? And so I really enjoyed seeing these different readings and how they provide us these strategies. I just wish that it became more tangible in the workplace. Us as educators were doing the program and, being able to learn more and can implement these skills into our classroom. But what does this look like for the masses? And, how does all of that work out? But ultimately, it's definitely unfortunate seeing young people experience these traumas. And as an adult, sometimes I feel so sad for them because I want to do more, but of course, there's boundaries to it, and everything. It's just, unfortunate. But I'm glad to have just sat and just become more informed about how to, navigate in my classroom space.
To voice Tal's comment, she said that I agree with Locke. I read that same article and it has made me second guess my actions in class before acting or reacting to behaviors. I've definitely seen my students go through this as well. The readings have definitely had me sitting there reflecting on myself and my actions. I also like what Simone said about how we're taught to teach and not how to teach. I think there's a new trend of us teaching emotionally. Yeah. Um, One of my big takeaways from like all of it was that just like kind of being inquisitive like towards students about what's going on is like a great way to kind of start to build that trusting relationship that you need for them to ever confide in you. Um, I don't know. Something like I've always wondered is like how do you like ask a child what's going on at home if they don't know you well and like because you can't expect them to just like give that to you. Um, but when I was reading chapter 9 of Body Keeps Score, it talked about something called the traumatic antecedents questionnaire, and how there's like subtle questions that you can ask, um, and that they become progressively more specific over time to figure out if something's going on at home. So something that's like more subtle is who do you talk to when you're upset? And then something that's like a bit more, um, I guess like personal would be, was there anybody who you felt safe with growing up? And then that way it doesn't seem like you're like, I don't know.
You're not interrogating them.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
I find it really interesting what children will share.
oh yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, like, how are you doing today? And they pour out their entire life. And I think some of them are just naturally inclined to be open, or they just seek that emotional support in the school system. So, you have like school moms and school daughters or children and stuff like that, or uncles, school dad, just that familiar aspect of school. I know in my classroom, I try to remain open. And so my students know, they feel like they know a lot about my life and they don't, but they know like, information that's like, oh, okay, Miss Davis is like relatable and you know what I mean? And so there's times like I like to dress up when I go to work just because you gotta feel good. Even if I'm tired, I want to feel good, and look good. And so like, oh, like Miss Davis, they make assumptions sometimes about me and my upbringing. And I'm like, don't judge me by what you're seeing today. There's many things that have happened over my life that, if we were closer, if it was appropriate to share, I would tell you a little tidbit. So sometimes I'll include stories like, I might have got embarrassed at school and fell down the steps, or I try to make it a relatable and like free flowing space so that way they feel comfortable. And in teaching science, trying to pull those real world examples in as much as possible. And so, like, if I'm wondering about a student, I do have some that I've kind of identified as kind of like question marks. And I think this is going into that second question, I guess, second or third question, like reflecting on students that are in our classroom. I've identified some that are, I think things could be going on and either they're not saying them or somebody may know and they just develop tendencies, just trying to, poll them, including things in warm up questions like, what's some crazy things that have happened to you? In my school, we did prioritize SEL that first week of school. So our content, like God said, we should have started teaching the second day of school, but they do like a boot camp. And so it's onboarding for all the students to kind of just learn the school, things that you might need to know, GPA, counseling, all of the services they offer. But then also as teachers, we're not supposed to teach. You just do activities that'll enhance your relationship with the students. So we did get to know you icebreakers. We actually did speed dating, and I had a variety of questions in there. Of course, those about embarrassing times. What's a pet peeve? If a bug was on your plate at a family member's house, what would you do? Just to try to get them to feel comfortable and open up and share and just relate to each other. And so it sparked a couple of interesting and deeper conversations from that. Um, and so that was pretty cool. But also, we wrote letters to ourselves. And so I said, let's sit down. let's acknowledge the space that we're in because our first week of school, our air went out. It was really hot. It was, yeah, we had last week in school, there was a fire drill that was actually a real fire. And we had a kid brought a weapon to campus sometime during the day. And there was also like a bomb threat on Friday. So all in one, all in 1 week. And so that's traumatizing. This is supposed to be our safe place. We have scanners, smoke detectors, everything in place. But in doing the letter to themselves activity, a student, he disclosed that, if he hadn't committed suicide by a certain age, he would be surprised at himself. And he revealed a whole bunch of other things. And so going through those has been really helpful. It's been a tool that I've been able to use and just, discreetly find out some more personal information about them or how they feel about their self confidence. And there was like a little kind of like guided rubric. And I think it's something that we as educators could include more in our classrooms. And so I can maybe send that to y'all if y'all do want it. But I think that's a way, like just discreetly kind of hinting or nudging, like, let's talk about our weekends. And it's always going to be somebody that either consistently shies away when they have those discussions, or it's going to be that kid that overshares. And so I try to tap on the ones that don't want to share, not just, I know you didn't talk about it, but what happened, or try to make those relationships and small connections. That's for sure.
This is something really minor, but when you mentioned how you like to dress professionally and you're kind of worried that like your students might make assumptions about you, I like go through that same thought process because I also like to feel really put together before school. So it's just good to know that I'm not the only one that thinks about that.
Yeah, no, I definitely will put an outfit on and but I will wear sneakers and like keep it casual.
Yeah.
But in my building, they call me Beyonce, the staff. It's like a whole thing. A lot of people have nicknames, but like, yeah. So I'm like, okay, if I gotta be Beyonce, but at least the kids know one thing Miss Davis is gonna do. She's gonna have an outfit on, and she's at least gonna look put together, even when the storm is brewing all around campus. I'm gonna try to put my best looking foot forward and stuff. But glad somebody else is doing it.
I really liked, and I definitely agree with what you said about that kind of writing activity where you got a lot of students to open up to you in a way that they might not have if you were approaching them in a standard conversation, whether that's because they just are shy with everybody or because of the kind of power imbalance between you two, that's just kind of inherent to your position. I definitely have learned a lot, and guess I'm lucky that I'm an English teacher about my students through different writing activities that we do. Sometimes it's small things just about like pet peeves or things that like ignore them or make them up or annoy them or make them upset that I can kind of stow away for later. But sometimes they will mention some kind of like really horrific or really uplifting story that was like a big stepping stone for their development. So I think that's something I need to keep doing for the rest of the year, just as a way to let the kids open up to me, let me see the full picture better, because the full picture is easier for me to work with and easier for me to support than a fragment that I get for 48 minutes.
I didn't even think about the difference in subjects. I didn't even think about that. Is Tala, are you math if you're able to answer? Or like what's your main subject? But I didn't even
Hey,
consider that.
I'm English as a second language, and I want to agree with that. I feel like my science and math counterparts don't get that same opportunity. I think with English and more so like literature-based subjects, since we deal with tone and meaning and stuff like that a lot, it just really gets us more in touch with our feelings in class. And I think that's a way, or that's like a main point to where, or to how we can get more of a connection with those students.
Yeah. I think that's great though. I didn't even think about that. Like I know we've done our PDP for our year and our team kind of, went back and forth on whether we're going to include more literacy based practices because, the drive in STEM is consistently data, analytics, and, all of that. But then also we have content, I mean, curriculum that says, push SEL. So how do we mesh these two and get students to, of course, learn the content and also, activate different senses in them. But wow, I really think that's cool. I feel like now I need to do more like kind of like free write activities and stuff like that. Of course, we do, readings for science. And I'm sure y'all know that can get really boring. But maybe I'll try to incorporate some type of routine, just writing activity that kind of, touches on the English and, just literature stuff things.
I mean,
Yeah, I really do. I was yeah, really, it's just like such a great way to learn so much about your students, especially when the prompt is quite broad and they have more say in what they want to write about. I don't know. I feel like I've learned a lot. I did do surveys at the beginning of the year though.
Really?
Um, but it did remind me, like going through this, that I did have a kind of like going back to the third question, that I did have a student whose mom passed away over the summer. And honestly reflecting, I've done like just a really shitty job of checking in with her and making sure she's okay. I think I've just gotten so caught up in the day to day of just getting through the day, that I haven't checked in. So that's gonna be my priority this week.
If we're touching on the third question, I have kind of it asks to talk about I don't know, things that we're doing well and things that we're doing better. So I guess I have
Yeah.
a success story to share, but then I also have a question that I want to pose to the rest of you that I could maybe use some advice on. So I guess to start on the positive note, I have a student, I'll call him Student X, that I met during open house. And he kind of immediately stuck out to me because he was the only student there who was not with his parents, but with his two older sisters who are
Okay.
like our age. And who were like, they definitely seem like adults, but maybe not the type that should be raising a 17-year-old boy. Um, and he was very like quiet and withdrawn, never misbehaved and always like on task, but very quiet and withdrawn for the first week of class. And then during the second week, he just stopped. He would disappear after attendance. I would do attendance, they would go to lunch, and then he wouldn't come back from class. And I my first instinct was that he was skipping because a bunch of my other students had been caught and suspended for skipping my class after lunch to try to go to the second lunch or to try to start a fight or whatever. And I, I guess I thanking my past self for this, but I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt because he hadn't done anything to make me think that he was the type to skip. Um, and that's a whole separate conversation. But so I reached out. I knew he was on the football team, and I reached out to his coach, and the coach was like, "Yeah, you're not going to see student X a lot this week because he's going to be in the counselor. He's been with our school counselor all day." Um, and I was just like, "Oh, okay, thank you so much for letting me know." And I was able to kind of stockpile the work that we were doing for that week and give it to student X when he returned. And he was super apologetic when he came back that he didn't communicate that he was with the counselor to me, which I didn't. I was like, you don't have to apologize, man. I'm glad you're here with us. And then the next day, he asked me to proofread his college essay for him because he has an offer from a school in the Northwest that has a
Oh
division
wow.
football program to go after graduation. He would be the first like person in his family to go to college. And essay writing is something that I know how to do very well. I may not be an
Yeah.
expert on teaching or behavior management yet, but I know a thing or two about writing essays. So I was like, absolutely, I can totally help you. And so he started coming to my room instead of going to lunch to work on his essay, and I was able to provide some feedback and kind of general tweaks and just suggestions for how he could better answer the prompt. And during that time, he's kind of started sharing more and more from his life story with me. And there's been some truly horrific and really upsetting stuff related to his some parental like physical abuse and his father being in prison for domestic violence and a suicide attempt that he had. But this has ultimately like created a really great relationship between us, and now he's like he's just a blessing to have in class. He's a great role model for the other kids. He's a leader, especially in the group assignments and debates that we're doing. He's always encouraging other kids in the class who are on the football team with him to stay focused and to stay on task and to try their best to also be role models. And so I guess I'm just very glad that I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I should be doing that with more students because it's blossomed into this great thing. But I guess on the flip side of that, and this is where I wanted to ask all of you, is I have a lot of students who I do think are experiencing some kind of trauma at home just based on what I know about how humans, especially young men, tend to react to this kind of thing. Whose reaction to repeated trauma and triggers is hostility, and especially towards authority figures like myself. I try my best to be friendly and welcoming to every student every day, even the kids who are kind of acting up every day or being mean to other students every other day. But I feel like the approach isn't working with them. So, and I know that this misbehavior, some of it is just age and the social pressures of trying to be like a cool guy and a tough guy definitely play a role in it. But I know at the end of the day, this is coming from a place where they're trying to mask feelings of inadequacy or frustration, and they're using it with they're misbehaving as a way to do that. So I wanted to ask you guys, how do you crack the wall? How do you break down the wall that these types of students build around themselves?
I don't want to interrupt you, but real quick, I did just get a notification from Zoom that we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think the main thing for me is I want to say trying to be relatable as possible, but also reminding them what your role is in the classroom. Yes, be welcoming, be friendly, and welcome them into the space, but also remind them that this is meant to be a space that cultivates positive energy. And if there is something that you constantly bring into the door that's the negative energy, we need to figure it out and we can identify and talk about that. And so last year, my sixth period I feel like it was honestly almost male dominated. Like the guys just always want to talk and argue and compare to each other and just like go back and forth. And some of them were frequent flyers we have a do not admit list. So it's like if they have ISS or OSS, just don't admit them to class, send them to, the respective areas. And so trying to remind them that this is a safe space that you can share in, even if it might not be the most comfortable thing, and just kind of like pushing that learning aspect and then having to take that time. And so sometimes when we do a lot of group work or just that independent work session, if I could pull them over to my desk and be like, okay, like we're not going to keep moving back and forth in class. I need you to focus. I want to see you win, but just tell me what's going on. So that way, if I see you doing this or like, just having a bad day, let me know that up front when you walk into the door. So that way I don't respond. And that kind of goes back to what you said in your first, like how you first kind of started us off, like what your response was to the question. I mean, like to misbehavior, like, you just immediately kind of discipline. Um, just building that relationship to say, I know that everything is not going to be okay. Some days I'm not going to walk in here and have the best day. And like my students know, depending on how I start the class, they can either like Miss Davis is on one today. And sometimes it's just because, we have to get through content or whatever. But just trying to bridge that gap. And it sucks that, of course, you want to break down and have that conversation in the actual class. And you know what I'm saying? But if you can take 3 minutes to step out while other kids are working, or if they say, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to get everybody started. And then when they come back and come from the bathroom, I'm just like, let me go talk to them real quick and figure out what's going on. I think that's been beneficial, trying to break the barrier. And of course, for me, it's a little bit more difficult because we have genders here too. And so my neighboring teacher, he's a male, and seeing his relationship, how he interacts with some of the guys is like interesting. And being a woman, seeing how I interact with some of the guys, I'm like, it's interesting seeing that dynamic too. But I think definitely if you can take 2 minutes and just chat with them, I think that'll make a difference because how, you end up being able to have those small sessions with the student with the scholarship offer, that ended up being really great. And just trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. Some days, there'll be certain students where I make a deal. I know you don't want to do your work the full time. Give me 10 of these questions, then you can put your head down. Or if I constantly saw them putting their head down or just having that frustrated mood multiple days in a row, I'm like, okay, Simone, don't get on them each and every day. You know what I'm saying? That one day, try to tap them, see what's going on. If they don't want to respond, let them have a day to cool off, and then try to, we go back into it. And then if it's something continuous that they're not doing, then, try to check in about it. And what is crazy today, I had a visit from my, like a teaching coach of mine or whatever. And my seventh period this year is basically the same as my sixth period. I have like 15 students on the roster and about 8 IEPs. So we are busy in there. And there's so many personalities. And I was like, oh, like I got to figure out how to just get some better classroom management in there. And she was like, sometimes they don't need Miss Davis, they need to bring out Simone. And sometimes, it could be the positive and uplifting Simone, but then it's also going to have to be the Simone that's result driven, get this done. And so she's going to come in my class soon and try to, help with some ways to figure out how we can kind of identify these things. And she actually knew one of the students. She taught him in fifth grade, and now he's in 10th grade. And she kind of knows his story, and his behaviors are still the same from when he was like 10 years old. And so we're going to try to figure out what's going on that you constantly want to yell to the top of your lungs in class and know that you're behind in work and sit in class and don't want to do your work, but know your mom is going to get on you about your work. Like, so I just think, honestly, try your best. If you show up every day, try your best and, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I will definitely, there was a lot of wisdom in there, and I will definitely be reviewing this call later on to maybe take some notes on what you just said there. Because yeah, there's some stuff there that I want to try and I need to be doing more of. Before we run out of time, I think we should try to touch on the last question a bit about compassion fatigue, putting on our oxygen mask. I don't really have a lot of issues with this, so I thought I'd give the floor to someone else who might have struggled with this a little bit more or have some advice for people that are struggling with it.
I just feel more overwhelmed. Oh, please go.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I'll be quick. I was just gonna say that generally, I think I probably just feel more overwhelmed by everything all at once, not just like exclusively compassion fatigue. Um, and then when I was reading one of the articles, it was the Education Week one that gave some examples about things school administrators do to like help teachers cope, like things like them all doing yoga together. I'll be honest, I'm glad that we don't do that. Even though it's well intentioned, I feel like it might just end up feeling a little bit more like work and not very organic.
So to touch on the compassion fatigue part, I have definitely felt this. I started teaching last year, and there's a couple of students who see me as their safe person, and I'm very sorry to say that I don't see them as my safe students.
Funny, but I get it.
Sometimes I just feel like I have to exert so much energy to be empathetic and try to help them through their problems, and I'm just genuinely not suited or educated enough on the matter of just being a counselor on how to navigate through their issues with them. The first student that comes to mind, he has severe autism, and I am his safe student through and I'm his safe teacher through and through. And just seeing him just makes me feel really upset sometimes. Like I just feel drained just seeing him walking towards me, because he will go out of his way to wait and just stare me down for me to hug him, or he'll come up to me and hug me. And so I'm learning how to put those boundaries up, and it's very hard to do so without hurting his feelings because he just doesn't understand the same way that we do. So there's that. And then to touch on what Olivia just said, it does end up very much feeling like work. We do that at my school. It's very exhausting, although it does come from a good spot. It does come from a good space.
Yeah, I didn't mean to laugh during what you were saying, but I definitely related to, well, there are certain students that when they like are running down the hall, I'm like, oh my God, if you could just like fade into the lockers and like blend in, just because I know they might just take up some of that extra energy, especially when thresholding, you're trying to recharge and reboot yourself for the next class. Um, I definitely do know those feelings. My school has events and they try to, you know, encourage us to attend, but we also do have a staff relaxation room with massage chairs and stuff. So I try to go every blue moon if I can.
Massage chairs sound amazing. I love that for you.
Yeah, they're the Osakis.
I should
Um,
have one in my room.
Mm. I think because I'm still so new, when a student does like want to confide in me about anything, I'm like, really? You want to trust me to tell me this? But we're only a few weeks in, so
yeah. Well, I guess this was a successful call, and I
I'd say,
guess we'll follow up via text.
yeah.
yeah, for the planning stuff, we can all sort that out over text. Make sure that that gets done and that we're staying on the ball with that. But yeah, good talk. I agree.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Sounds great. See
Bye-bye.
y'all.
Bye.
Talk soon.